Could you please explain why we are all Africans?
I'm a fairly recently retired professor, and I'm professorial enough to draw on this convenient whiteboard here. That is 6 million years ago, and that is the common ancestor of chimpanzees and bonobos and humans.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
And what it was, it's an African Heritage Foundation chartered out of England with all white members. And their thing was to write a history where they to make a continental black person to take away from the global black person. So in so many words, the thing was to focus on Africa, to wipe out that we were a global people. You see what I'm saying? That was all over the globe, and everybody else came from that.
Exactly.
So as a result now, this thing works to this day, and some of your Afrocentric concepts and stuff came from these people in Europe. They think that, you know, we all West African, and based on a continental type thing.
Yeah. Hey. Turn the vocals up a little bit more, please.
Africa, our homeland. This is where it all began. We are all Africans. Archaeologists know this man as Omo 1. Omo 1 was discovered in 1967 by an international expedition to southern Ethiopia. They came looking for human fossils, eroding out of the ancient sediments, and sure enough, they found the remains of 3 prehistoric humans. The most complete skeleton was that of Omo 1. The bones of Omo 1 were from a layer that was 195,000 years old. In the 1980s, geneticists at Berkeley worked out how to trace human ancestry using mitochondria. They're the energy packs of a cell that sit outside the nucleus. Each of them contains a tiny coil of DNA passed on from mother to daughter. The research pointed to someone living in Africa about 200,000 years ago. She became known as mitochondrial Eve. Geneticists have taken the same approach with the Y chromosome, which is passed down the male line from father to son. The most recent common ancestor of every man alive today also lived in Africa. He became known as Y chromosomal Adam. This is an African skull from a site known as Jebel Irhoud. It's 300,000 years old. It belongs to an archaic human, someone who was not yet fully modern.
It's a very ancient-looking skull when you look at it from the side, but it has, especially considering its old age, a very modern-looking face.
The man from Jebel Irhoud appears to be a forerunner of our species. A modern human in waiting. According to this way of thinking, we are a species born of many parents across Africa.
Australia, one of the most multicultural countries on Earth. A nation of immigrants. But for 50,000 years, it was the very opposite. A home to an ancient people, cut off from the rest of humanity. Aboriginal Australians have some of the most ancient DNA in the world. They may hold the key to the survival of our species. It's one of the great mysteries of archaeology. Who first set foot on American soil? Who were these first Americans?
Jacqueline Johnson. She's fascinated by her great-great-grandfather, Albert Perry, who appears on the 1870 census as a freed slave in South Carolina. Johnson has been able to trace her roots back 5 generations, but she can't find any records before 1870. To track Albert Perry's lineage, she persuaded a male cousin to provide a sample of his Y chromosome. It was tested here at Family Tree DNA. Bennett Greenspan runs the company.
When I came into work the morning that the sample had been scored the night before, the technicians were actually very excited because they said, we've seen something and we've never seen anything like this before. Typically, you might find 1 or 2 or 3 novel mutations, but in this sample, we found between 40 and 50 novel mutations, which means it defines an entirely new subsection of the tree of mankind. It defines an entirely new subsection of the tree of mankind.
The Y chromosome from Jacqueline Johnson's cousin was so unusual, it was given its own name, A00. Geneticists checked thousands of other samples in their data sets, but found no one else with the same signal. Geneticists checked thousands of other samples in their data sets, but found no one else with the same signal, until they looked in Western Africa.
What? Oh, good grief.
Oh, shit. Here we go again.
The trail leads 7,000 miles from Houston to Mbeta village in Western Cameroon. In 2001, there was a program to sample DNA here. When the samples were reviewed in 2012, 11 of the men were a match for A00.
Right.
No one knows who they are because the tests were anonymous.
Right, okay. Get out of here with that.
But they're the only other people in the world known to have the same Y chromosome as Jacqueline Johnson's great-great-grandfather, Albert Perry.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God, stop your fucking lying.
White folks tell us that the planet is only 4.5 billion years old. At Koba, they have a calendar that is 16.4 billion years old. In fact, it's the oldest calendar in the world, right here in the Americas. So-called black folk in the Americas have the oldest calendars on the planet. It's called the long count calendar. When you're using the scale of time to go back into years, the geological eras, the Paleozoic is the oldest and only goes back to 590 million years. The thing about the book that I mentioned, The Message of the Engraved Stones of Ica, what you will find out is that these Amaru people, corresponding with the Mayan calendar that they were already here, depicted themselves interfacing with these Jurassic prototypical animals, Jurassic meaning dinosaurs. It's not only do they depict Jurassic animals, and Jurassic animals would have lived, according to modern data, 213 million years ago, they're the only ones on the planet that depict these particular things in carvings and etched glyph work.
What do you see in Africa?
I see nothing.
Africa is a big blank continent on this map. What this means is that you are the only person whom we've tested who actually descends from a Native American female.
But the first, or arguably the first, but certainly the most complete specimen of Australopithecus afarensis is the one called Lucy, and it was discovered by Donald Johanson in Ethiopia back in 1974. And if you look at the skeleton here, A good part of the skull is missing. There are no feet, just a couple little bones here and no hands. This is the skull of Australopithecus afarensis, and when we look at the skull, right away we see that this is not a human skull. Look at the face here. It slopes at an angle. We call this sort of a shovel face. And the human face goes up and down more vertically. Of the apes, here are the apes, and you're getting more curved as you go to the right. Here is the Hadar australopithecine, the Lucy-like creature, and human is way over here, the bottom one, way to the left. So highly curved fingers and highly curved toes. But this, again, would not be the way Lucy is displayed in our museums. The big problem, however, are the hips. And let's look at these hip bones. There's a distinct hip for apes and humans. And as far as I know, no overlap. You can't confuse an ape hip with a human hip. If you look at the top, that's a chimp. And at the bottom, that would be human. Notice the iliac blades of the human go front to back like this. It almost looks like a steering yoke on an airplane when you get them both together, right? Whereas the ape, the iliac blades flare out laterally. You can look at the pelvis and tell whether you're looking at an ape pelvis that cannot walk anything at all like we do, or a human pelvis. The big question is, what kind of pelvis does Lucy have? Well, Stern and Sussman said, the fact that the anterior portion of the iliac blade faces laterally in humans, but not in chimps, is obvious. The marked resemblance of Lucy to the chimpanzee is equally obvious. So you get the picture? The creatures like Lucy have the ape orientation of the iliac blades. I have $3,000 worth of hominid skull replicas, museum quality replicas with me, so you can kind of handle some of these skulls, including Lucy. And when you look at them, you'll notice, when you compare them to human skulls, apes lack nasal bones. And then if you put the finger under the nose and you come up, there's a little bony spine that stops your finger from coming up. And that's called the nasal spine, and apes don't have a nasal spine.
I mean, we are African, brother. That's right. Mother Africa's the only salvation.
You look, you phony-ass bougie nigga.
Sheriff, he's over here.
Oh, the lie detector test determined that was a lie.
Holy shit! Everybody plays the fool sometimes. There's no exception to the rule. Listen, baby, it may be factual.